Upon a thorough examination of Australia, many questions arise for the unprepared individual. Why does Australia have the most animals that don't exist anywhere else in the world? Over 85% of the continent's population lives within a 50-kilometer coastal zone, while the rest of the territory is essentially abandoned and fenced off from people by fences stretching more than 5,500 kilometers. Crossing such a fence is strictly prohibited. Violators face imprisonment or hefty fines. Many facts hint that behind these fences they're trying to conceal a certain territory not marked on modern maps. It's not improbable that Australia and Antarctica are connected to a secret land that can be discovered beyond these enclosures. For instance, flights from Australia almost always traverse the coastal ice of Antarctica. But where is Australia, and where is the neighboring continent? And why is Antarctica also closed off to ordinary mortals, with numerous prohibitions and the International Antarctic Treaty of 1958? What are they hiding from us in the southernmost part of the Earth, beyond the lands of Australia and Antarctica? What about the vast territory beyond the South Pole that American Rear Admiral Richard Byrd spoke of? And most importantly, how are these huge land masses actually situated, which they've forbidden us to explore? In this film, he'll answer all these questions. What's peculiar about Australia? For example, of the 10,000 plant species on this continent, 8,600 are not found elsewhere on Earth. Out of 200,000 animal species, nearly 90% are unique and only inhabit Australia. It's practically another world. Somewhat akin to jungles on Alpha Centauri, Australia is home to the most dangerous animals on the planet. Here, nature has devised entirely original methods of reproduction, with marsupials and mammals that lay eggs. It seems like the local animals are nothing more than the result of crossbreeding the most diverse creatures. It's as if, beyond Australia's fences, there's a laboratory hidden from us, where genetic engineering was once practiced. So, it's no wonder that the local Aboriginal people constantly recount stories of bunyips and other creatures that once lived or still live in the water and jungles on this continent. Now let's take a walk along the legendary Great Australian Wall and try to understand what's wrong with it. In fact, it is the largest fence complex in the world, the construction of which began back in the 19th century. The total length of the fence is a staggering 5,614 kilometers. In some places, the fences are electrically energized and powered by solar panels. But why are they needed? Of course, the authorities have their own version. Allegedly, these high fences are necessary to protect wildlife from wild dingoes and rabbits introduced to the continent, which, having no natural competitors, have become a particular threat to livestock. Oh yes, in some areas you'll even find a double row of fences. From time to time, patrols in SUVs can be spotted, apprehending those attempting to cross the forbidden border. But is this fence really meant for dogs and rabbits? When viewed from a satellite, the whole of Australia is divided into several sectors. Inquisitive tourists trying to jokingly breach the perimeter face serious problems, punishable by actual jail terms. Many researchers therefore have reasonable questions about the real purpose of these barriers. Research begun in 2009 found that, contrary to expectations, these fences are causing problems for local wildlife. The surprising discovery showed that the local diversity of small marsupials, reptiles, and plant life is much richer exactly where the dingoes live. This is probably due to competition with kangaroos and their role in fox control. This means that fences, conversely, create an imbalance in Australia's ecosystem. Nevertheless, these fences continue to be maintained. They are constantly being repaired, electricity is paid for, and money is allocated for militarized guards. So it seems that it's not really about ecology, and livestock can be protected from dingoes by far more adequate and effective means. Several articles on the internet, referring to a publication in Smithsonian Magazine, tell of Arthur Conan Doyle's former assistant, friend, and researcher, Sir John Morrison, who discovered a whole collection of strange photographs. The pictures depict very unusual, even anomalous objects, unexplained structures, representatives of unknown tribes and exotic animals. According to some reports, this is the Amazon jungle, according to others, the islands of Sumatra, and some believe that these are uncharted territories of Australia. Landscapes in the pictures seem so fantastical, and the people are drawn so poorly that some believe there was no escaping the talent of neural networks. They've long learned to depict in detail things that never existed. For instance, in this photo featuring mounds and many other interesting elements like some flying object with a humanoid, reducing the contrast reveals people. It's evident that these aren't real people but rather a mishmash of blotches. No faces, no hands, nothing specific. Even with heavy zooming, it becomes noticeable in this photo that in the foreground there's not a person but some kind of mess, unclear what. Or this photo of some cave person. In theory, this could also be a high-quality fake, because nowadays, neural networks can generate any random face of a person who doesn't exist in reality. What do you think? Does it look like a fake? Or perhaps there's still a chance that these are photos of very real places and living beings hidden from us behind the Great Australian Wall? Write about this in the comments. But even if we suppose that someone decided to joke and there's nothing like that, it doesn't mean there are no hidden pitfalls in Australia. It's not excluded that by such fakes, someone wants to discredit researchers who are trying to uncover the truth. Therefore, let's not stop here and continue exploring further. If the fences have been installed and maintained at the state level for over 100 years, if the prohibition on crossing the border exists more for people than for animals, then what's the matter? What are they hiding from us? Perhaps this wall is like the one in the movie Divergent, preventing the knowledge of another civilization's existence? Or is it an enclosure, like in the movie The 13th Floor, concealing from people the edge of the world? Maybe that's where our virtual reality ends? Or is it a wall from The Truman Show, behind which the creators of our artificial world sit and watch our lives live? Let's turn to the history of exploring Australia and try to find clues. If you look at ancient maps, it turns out that initially, Australia was considered part of Antarctica. For example, on Mercator's map, the south is labeled Terra Australis Nondum, roughly translating to not yet the southern land. Or on Pierre Duval's map, it's indicated as Terra Australis Southern Land, crossing the so-called Antarctic Circle. In the 18th century, the explored lands of modern Australia were referred to as New Holland, yet its outlines in the southern and eastern parts were not accurately defined. They were drawn for the sake of it. It's strange that even after 100 years, 19th century maps still depict an uncertain coastline in the southern part of Australia. Look at how detailed the coastline is on the west and east, and notice the perfectly straight line in the south. Strangely, without any settlements. A similar situation remains with this region of Australia to this day. There are no settlements here. Google Maps draw a cluster of cities for the sake of appearance, which even visually have a few major streets. But if we enter them through panoramic view, it turns out these are just tracks, photographed by the Google car anywhere in the expanses of Australia. Why does no one live in the southern part of the continent? Perhaps Australia is not a continent, but a peninsula transitioning into Antarctica. After all, Australia is said to be the only continent without a single volcano. And here's another intriguing detail. In the southern part of Australia, there are snow-capped mountains, and there's much more snow in them than even in the European Alps at the peak of the skiing season. For instance, the slopes of Mount Kosciuszko in winter in New South Wales, Australia. Who knows, maybe nearby there's a secret passage to Antarctica. But the most interesting thing is, planes flying, for example, from Santiago de Chile in South America towards Australia, always fly over the Antarctic ice. What's the problem with flying directly from point A to point B without this strange curve? Such curved flight paths and even triangular trajectories, by the way, are constantly observed in international flights. Maybe it's because we somehow incorrectly position the continents on our maps. And that's why it seems illogical to us that the route to Australia passes through Antarctica. Why would an airline carrier add extra kilometers in such a risky region? Could it be that Australia is part of Antarctica, protruding closer to the equator and therefore not as cold? Our video investigation would be incomplete without another equally intriguing topic, the topic of Antarctica. its secrets and oddities are no less significant. The name Antarctica comes from Greek and translates as opposite to the Arctic, opposite to the north. Regarding flights, there are also questions here, and the most important one sounds like this. Why do planes never fly over Antarctica? It's much shorter than various detours across half the world. But no, we're told that it's cold there, with strong winds and all that. Wait a moment. We can fly over the coasts of Antarctica when flying from South America to Australia, but flying over Antarctica itself is out of the question. If you also believe that something is amiss here, give it a like or argue your opinion in the comments. Maybe it's because Antarctica is not exactly a continent, or the continent is not quite as it's depicted in textbooks and maps. And if it's not exactly like that, then what should the map of our world look like so it doesn't lie about the sizes, shapes, and locations of the continents? Perhaps something like this, or like this, or maybe like the emblems of the UN, WHO, and other international organizations. Let's turn to the opinion of someone who visited Antarctica as part of the Operation High Jump expedition. This operation was organized by the U.S. military forces in 1946-1947 to explore Antarctica. The expedition was led by retired Rear Admiral Richard Byrd. The operation began on August 26, 1946, and ended in late February 1947, 6 months earlier than planned, supposedly due to the early onset of the Antarctic winter.
Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Well, Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do.
What does it mean then? Beyond the geographical South Pole, there's still an area the size of the USA where no human foot has ever stepped. But Antarctica, according to the official version, has long been circumnavigated from all sides. And overall, where on the globe, if the Earth is a sphere, can such a vast piece of land be placed? Can it be that the Earth is not entirely a sphere, or not a sphere at all? Furthermore, Richard Byrd in his interview mentions the discovery of a vast coal deposit in Antarctica. He also states that firstly, Antarctica used to be a tropical continent. Secondly, the Antarctic coal deposits are not covered by snow. And thirdly, the presence of valuable minerals suggests that Antarctica was destined to become the subject of territorial disputes and claims in the future, similar to what happened with the Arctic. However, shortly after the High Jump expedition, an international treaty was signed declaring Antarctica as a land that belongs to no one. What could have united competing nations like this? According to the Antarctic Treaty, nobody except scientists and military personnel can be in Antarctica, besides rare tourist trips. We see something similar in Australia, where everything is done to prevent ordinary people from accessing restricted areas, allegedly for the protection of local flora and fauna. Perhaps they are hiding traces of a previous civilization that lived there during the tropical period. The presence of inexplicable objects of precise form clearly indicates a man-made origin in Antarctica. For instance, there are rows of sharp-pointed figures in the midst of the snowy plain. Also, pyramids located in Antarctica, according to Google Maps coordinates displayed on your screen. This structure doesn't just resemble the Pyramid of Khufu. It has the same grooves on one external wall and perhaps on all other walls, precisely similar grooves to those found on the walls of the Egyptian pyramid. But there is one significant and fundamental difference. While each side of the Giza pyramid measures 230 meters, the southernmost pyramid in Antarctica is a whopping 2 kilometers long. Yet, if the construction style of these structures appears alike, it suggests that the time of construction and usage of these buildings was approximately the same. The way, does anyone remember that the pyramids in Giza were initially buried under a layer of sand? In Egypt, it was sand, and in Antarctica, it's snow. This object was discovered at the beginning of 2018. Upon zooming in, it's clear that this object couldn't have appeared randomly. However, these ridges are no longer visible on Google Maps. Instead, there are strange objects, either visible or already airbrushed on satellite maps. There is a truly shocking collection of old photographs, the exact origin of which is challenging to determine online. Some believe these photos were created by a neural network. They are usually attributed to participants in Admiral Byrd's expedition. The photographs showcase pyramids, ruins of ancient cities, buildings in Roman style, columns, statues of obvious European-like people, and even petroglyphs on cave walls. A similar set of photos is linked to the Terra Nova expedition under the leadership of British Captain Robert Scott in 1912. Many believe that these photos are also the work of a neural network. Here we see statues of people from some unknown civilization, and there, the stone ruins of an ancient city. And in this photograph, if you adjust the contrast and brightness, you can make out a second smaller pyramid. Their substantial number hints that these are most likely not fabrications, but real photographs. If these photos are not the result of clever Photoshop work or the output of a sophisticated neural network, but real photographs, then we might speculate why Antarctica was closed off to curious onlookers after the expedition. It's evident that Antarctica's ice conceals unknown pages of our past and new unknown territories of humanity, which apparently were known to the intelligence services of Germany, the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. It's not unlikely that during the construction of their base, Neuschwabenland, the Germans inherited something valuable from these places. Moreover, considering that scientists studied core samples from the Payne Glacier on an island 2,000 kilometers from the South Pole and found traces of a marshy coniferous tropical forest, it paints a remarkable picture. A tropical climate existed in Antarctica relatively recently. 1,600 years ago, not 90 million years ago. Why did we reach this conclusion? Because there are pyramids there, very similar to the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Hence, it's likely that a civilization relatively recently inhabited Antarctica, possibly contemporaneous with ancient Egypt and ancient Rome, or their precursor. Apparently, the Antarctic civilization had cultural ties to the amazing world of Australia and knew something shocking about the history of our Earth. Subscribe to my channel. See you soon.